On the way to work, the vision hit me like a punch in the gut. Her car. Parked there, at the restaurant. At that time in the morning. My body remained motionless, my thoughts became confused in a whirlwind of hypotheses that I didn't want to consider, but that were drawn in my mind as if I already knew the truth. Maybe it was just a coincidence, maybe it had stopped there for some random reason. But no. Something inside me already knew. Something inside me felt the ground open before my eyes even witnessed the scene. My hands were shaking as I got out of the car and approached. The glass of the restaurant offered me a clear view, a view I will never forget. She was there, sitting at the table with him. Her hands rested on his, and her broken smiles betrayed an intimacy that I didn't want to see. A passionate look, a complicit touch, a muffled laugh, as if the world outside didn't exist, as if that moment belonged only to them. But I was there. I existed. I saw it. Betrayal has a smell, a bitter taste that fills the mouth and poisons the soul. Betrayal tears through the chest with an invisible blade, but sharp enough to leave an irreparable hole. The entire restaurant seemed to disappear, the surrounding noises became a distant hum. There was only her. There was only him. There was only the weight of knowing that everything I believed to be true, everything I had built, was crumbling before my eyes. And she had no idea that I was there, standing still, crushed by my own heart. I felt the heat rise through my body, not from love, but from something corrosive, toxic, something that transformed me in that instant. My eyes burned, but not from tears. My fingers tightened on the cell phone in my pocket, and a thought took shape. If that was what she wanted, then I would give her the chance to watch everything fall apart before her eyes, just like I was seeing now. I took my cell phone out of my pocket and raised the camera. One click. Then another. And one more. Each photo was a piece of my pain materialized, an irrefutable record of what happened there. Divorce would be epic. But something inside me still hoped that she would step back, that she would look around and realize that she was making the cruelest mistake of her life. But no. She laughed. A light, spontaneous, loose laugh. A laugh I knew well, but that would never be mine again. My chest swelled with a mixture of anger and hurt. I swallowed hard, feeling the acidic taste of disappointment. What makes someone do this? What leads a person to destroy a heart that gave itself completely? What leads someone to betray someone who woke up every morning ready to love, build, fight? I wanted to get in there. I wanted her to see me. I wanted to see her expression when she realized the game was over. But then a colder, more calculating thought took hold of me. No, it wouldn't be there. It wouldn't be at that moment. I would do better. I would let her live her illusion a little longer, I would let her indulge in that ridiculous theater. And then, when she least expected it, when she thought she was safe, I would pull the rug out from under her and make her fall into her own mistake. His car was there. Yes, that man, that stranger who now occupied the place that should have been mine, had no idea that his choice would cost dearly. He was just another sidekick, a disposable piece in her dirty game. But I wasn't. I never went. I walked away, certain that that day would mark the beginning of something much bigger than just a separation. I wouldn't just leave her. I wouldn't just leave the scene. I would make every bad choice of hers come back to haunt her. I would make her feel the taste of loss, rejection, abandonment. And when that day came, when she finally realized what she had done, when she looked back and saw that she destroyed the only foundation that really supported her, I would be long gone. But the damage would already be done. And then, she would realize what she never imagined: betrayal doesn't just destroy those who are betrayed. Betrayal also destroys those who betray. And the worst was yet to come. Welcome to the channel where the truth about cheating is exposed bluntly. Here, we do not romanticize, much less support any type of betrayal. Our stories are fictional, but the lesson is real: infidelity destroys lives, corrodes relationships and always takes its toll. Get ready for an intense story, full of twists and emotions. Take a deep breath, because what comes next will shock you. The morning still carried the freshness of the previous night when Daniel left the house, adjusting the knot of his tie as he ran his fingers through his dark hair. The routine was always the same: a hurried coffee, a kiss on Olivia's forehead, a brief wave before walking through the door and disappearing through the garage. But that morning, something in him hesitated. A split second in which his eyes fell on Olivia, still wrapped in her satin robe, holding the coffee cup between her slender fingers. She smiled, as she did every morning, a smile that for years was his refuge, the certainty that, despite the tiredness, the work and the weight of the world, there was a home, a safe haven where he could always anchor. But there was something different that morning, something Daniel couldn't define. Their marriage has always been solid. It wasn't perfect, but solid. They built a comfortable life together, a spacious house in a quiet neighborhood, where all the windows reflected the routine of structured families, with children playing in the backyards and dinners served religiously at 7. They had been like that too. A couple who, over the years, have found a type of comfort in predictability. Daniel, with his discipline and meticulousness, drew up plans for each stage of his life, while Olivia, more impulsive and sensitive, balanced her husband's pragmatism with generous doses of spontaneity. In the beginning, this dynamic completed them. He was the man of certainties, and she was the woman of surprises. But time, always relentless, has made predictability not only a basis but also a prison. Daniel worked as a financial manager at a multinational, which guaranteed him a good salary and stability. But at the cost of what? Overtime, endless meetings, days that started too early and ended too late. He knew that in recent years his presence at home had become scarce. But he did it for them. For the future. Olivia, on the other hand, dedicated herself to what she always loved, art. After years of repressing her passion for fear of not being taken seriously, she finally managed to exhibit her paintings in a local gallery. It was a proud moment for both of them. He admired her. I liked seeing her absorbed in her canvases, her hands dirty with paint, her eyes twinkling when she talked about some new idea. Olivia was an intense woman, and Daniel always loved her for that. But, recently, there was a distancing that he didn't know how to name. The nights had changed. The silence between them felt different. Before, the tiredness of the day ended in whispered conversations in bed, muffled laughter, plans for trips that were never made. Now, it ended in automatic kisses and glances lost in the glow of the cell phone screen. He didn't know exactly when it started, but he knew how to recognize it when it became impossible to ignore. That morning, as he drove to work, thoughts pounded his mind. He wondered if something was wrong, if he should have done something differently, if he should have insisted more on finding time for both of them. But life didn't take breaks. He believed that everything was under control, that this was just a phase. After all, marriages go through ups and downs. It's always been like this. Olivia, in turn, watched Daniel leave without knowing exactly what he felt. There were years when that man was her certainty, the axis around which her life revolved. But now, she felt suffocated. Not because of him, but because of a growing restlessness within himself. She felt like a woman living in black and white, while longing for color. I couldn't understand where this overwhelming need for something more came from. Something new. He took a deep breath, took the last sip of coffee and looked around. The house was impeccable, every object meticulously in place, every corner reflecting the life they had built together. But why, then, did she feel so lost within that perfection? She spent her afternoons in the studio, immersed in frantic brushstrokes that tried to express a feeling that not even she herself could decipher. Art has always been his way of escaping, of channeling what words couldn't say. But lately, even vibrant colors have seemed too pale. The day went like any other. Daniel trapped between numbers and graphs, Olivia immersed in her screens. Neither of them knew that night would mark a turning point. When Daniel arrived home, he found Olivia different. He couldn't say exactly what, but he noticed. Dinner was ready, as always. But there was a strange gleam in her eyes, an enthusiasm he hadn't seen in a long time. They sat at the table and exchanged a few words. He told her about a problem at work, she mentioned something about a new exhibition. Everything seemed normal. But it wasn't. Later, as they lay in bed, Daniel held Olivia's hand. Small gestures that he tried to keep alive, even when he felt the space between them was widening. She returned the squeeze, but her gaze was distant. In the days that followed, this feeling only increased. Small details began to catch his attention. Her cell phone is always facing down. The messages read quickly, the subtle smile she tried to hide. But he pushed those thoughts away. There was no room for paranoia. However, something inside him began to worry. Small moments of doubt began to turn into permanent shadows. Something was different, something was changing, and he didn't know what it was. But he would find out. And when he found out, nothing would be the same again. Time has a cruel way of turning certainties into doubts. In the days that followed, Daniel felt the world around him change without anything, apparently, being different. But it was something out of place, something silent and corrosive that seeped into the cracks of everyday life, creating cracks that were invisible but impossible to ignore. Olivia continued with her smiles, her soft gestures, the well-rehearsed routine. But there was something in her eyes, a restlessness that Daniel couldn't name, but that weighed on him like an imminent threat. It was as if the distance between them had taken on a palpable texture, an emptiness that he sank into every night, lying next to her, feeling the warmth of her body but knowing that, somehow, she was no longer there. At first, he tried to convince himself it was paranoia. All marriages go through phases, he repeated to himself. The work had consumed so much of his time that perhaps he was just exaggerating, seeing problems where none existed. But then the signs began. Small, almost insignificant, but they piled up like pieces of a puzzle he didn't want to put together. Olivia went out more than usual, justifying it with meetings at the gallery, meetings with artists, events that previously seemed to be secondary, but that now took up her nights and weekends. The messages she received and quickly ignored, her cell phone always facing down, the discreet smiles while reading something, the rush to change her clothes before leaving, different perfumes than usual. Daniel watched everything, feeling the discomfort turn into anguish. He wanted to believe it was just in his head, but instinct screamed something different. Intuition is a slow poison, a constant whisper that, once heard, never stops. He began to realize how alone he was within his own marriage. Before, Olivia always included him in her plans, in her ideas, in her concerns. Now, she seemed to carry a secret, something that filled her in a way he could no longer do. That night, lying in bed while Olivia showered, Daniel stared at the ceiling. Water was running from the shower, and he knew she would spend more time than usual in there. Lately, she seemed to need moments away from him, as if the space between them was necessary for her to breathe. He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of suspicion become an uncomfortable certainty. He never wanted to be the kind of man who was suspicious, who stuck to assumptions, but there, at that moment, he knew it was no longer possible to ignore it. The next day, he made a decision. He wouldn't confront Olivia yet, not until he was sure. Doubt was a punishment in itself, but no worse than the humiliation of being wrong. Then he began to observe. Little details, patterns in schedules, vague answers that he wouldn't have noticed before. And then came the moment that sealed any remnants of denial. It was an ordinary morning, like so many others. He left for work, driving the same streets, following the same route. But when passing by a restaurant in the center, one detail caught his attention. Olivia's car, parked there. It wasn't unusual for her to go out on professional dates, but that place, at that time, made something inside him freeze. He slowed down, feeling his heart beating erratically in his chest. An impulse made him stop, parking discreetly a few meters away. He got out of the car and walked slowly, feeling his breathing heavy. The restaurant's glass offered a clear view of the interior. And then he saw it. She was there, sitting at the table, accompanied. But it wasn't just the presence of the other that made the impact. It was the way she smiled. How she leaned her body towards him, how she held the wine glass in a way that exuded intimacy, how her eyes sparkled in a way he hadn't seen in years. Daniel felt his blood run cold, his hands tingle. He blinked a few times, hoping the vision in front of him would dissipate, that it was a mistake, an absurd coincidence. But it wasn't. Olivia was there, with another man, and everything in her body language betrayed that this was not a casual encounter. The air became heavy, the noises around seemed muffled. He felt a wave of anger and disbelief rise through his chest, as if reality was crumbling beneath his feet. He took out his cell phone, with trembling fingers, and took some photos. The click of the camera sounded like a verdict. Here was proof of what he feared, but part of him was still reluctant to accept. His eyes went back inside the restaurant. He could come in, he could confront them right there, he could get an explanation out of Olivia that, deep down, he already knew wouldn't make any difference. But something inside him refused. It wouldn't be there. Not at that moment. He wouldn't give her the pleasure of seeing him broken, of seeing his pain exposed in public. Then he turned his back and went back to the car, feeling an overwhelming emptiness take over him. There were many questions, many conflicting emotions, but only one absolute certainty: the betrayal was real. And he wouldn't let it go unpunished. Daniel felt the weight of betrayal pressing him against reality, a suffocating force that made every breath a painful reminder of what he had seen. The images were there, recorded on his cell phone, but recorded even more cruelly in his mind. Olivia, smiling, leaning across the table, her hands resting on top of his. The sparkle in her eyes, a reflection of something he no longer awakened. He could have confronted her at that moment, he could have caused a scandal, but he chose silence. Silence was crueler, more lethal. The betrayal was already a certainty, but now came the darkest part, discovering how far it went, understanding the depths of the abyss into which Olivia had plunged. The following nights were unbearable. He slept next to her, but her every movement in bed felt like an insult. Every quiet breath of hers burned. The accidental touch of her legs against his was becoming unbearable. His heart debated between hate and love, between the need for revenge and the pain of accepting that the woman with whom he shared years of his life was no longer his. But there was still one piece missing. He needed to know everything. Who was the man? How long had that been happening? Whether it was just a slip-up or a hoax built over the years. He needed that answer. And he would have her. The next day brought a different Daniel. He was no longer a wounded man trying to understand. Now, he was a man determined to destroy. And it started as it always has, meticulous. He researched, observed patterns, analyzed schedules. It didn't take long until he found the other man's name. Matthias. The owner of a small consulting company. A common face, a common name, but a role that changed everything. His phone was firmly in his hands when he decided to call Olivia in the middle of the afternoon. She answered after a few rings, her voice soft, as always. He asked if he would come home early, if he wanted something special for dinner. Daniel smiled emotionlessly. She was still pretending, still maintaining the charade, as if nothing was happening. As if he hadn't spent the night before in someone else's arms. But now, he had a question for her, a single question that would destroy any lie she could still sustain. He kept his voice calm, almost casual, and asked if she would be busy that evening. If he could stop by his company, because something unexpected had happened and he needed to talk. There was a short silence on the other end of the line before she confirmed, her voice hesitant, perhaps suspicious. Night fell, and Olivia arrived at the office on time. She walked in as if it were any other day, her eyes searching for any clue as to what Daniel wanted to say. He watched her come in and sit across from him, and for a moment, he almost doubted himself. There was so much about her that he still loved. The way she touched her hair when she was nervous, the way she frowned when she tried to decipher a situation. But that didn't matter anymore. He leaned forward, placing his cell phone on the table. He took a deep breath before asking. He asked in a simple, direct, blunt way. Who was Matthias? Her reaction came in waves. First, surprise. Then, a brief panic, which he tried to hide with a forced laugh. He said he didn't know what he was talking about, he tried to remain calm, but Daniel already knew the signs of a lie too well. He kept his gaze steady, waiting, until she looked away. But it was when he slid his cell phone over to her, the screen lit up showing the photos he'd taken of the restaurant, that Olivia completely lost color. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, he saw something he didn't expect. Fear. But not the fear of being caught. It was something deeper. A real, desperate fear, as if something much worse was about to happen. She tried to speak, tried to justify. He said it was a mistake, that he didn't understand, that he needed time to explain. But he didn't want empty explanations. He wanted the truth, the whole truth. And then came the confession he hadn't expected. Olivia finally looked up at him, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. Her voice shook when she said she never wanted him to find out like this. That she tried to stop, that she wanted to go back, but something was holding her back. Something he didn't know. Something he didn't imagine. And then, she told him. Matthias was not just a lover. He was someone from the past. Someone who, years ago, before Daniel came into her life, played a role she never confessed to. He was a mistake that she thought she had erased, but that resurfaced and trapped her in a cycle she couldn't get out of. He was her first love. The man who, in the past, made her believe that was everything. But he was also the man who abandoned her, who disappeared, who broke her into 1,000 pieces. And now, after so many years, he had returned. But not out of love. He came back because he knew something. Something about Olivia. Something that, if revealed, would destroy everything she had built. Daniel felt the world spin. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was something bigger. Something he still didn't fully understand, but now enveloped him in an inescapable way. And Olivia, looking at him with teary eyes, said the sentence that sealed everything. Matthias came back to get revenge. And she never had a choice. Daniel felt the impact of those words as if a punch had hit him in the stomach. The air seemed to disappear from his lungs for a few moments. Revenge. Matthias wasn't just a lover, he wasn't just a mistake in the present, but a ghost from the past that came back to haunt Olivia and, consequently, him too. He felt his heart accelerate, but he forced his voice to come out firm, cold, cutting. She asked what that meant, what Matthias had against her, what he wanted, why Olivia seemed to be trapped in something she couldn't get out of. Olivia hesitated, her lips trembling, her gaze lost on the floor. He slammed his hand on the table, making the cell phone slide a few centimeters, the dry sound of wood echoing through the office. He demanded that she speak. Now. No more lies. She closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and then began to count. Years before meeting Daniel, when she was still a young girl full of dreams, naive and impulsive, Olivia became involved with Matthias. It was intense, it was overwhelming, but it was also destructive. He was charming, magnetic, someone who knew exactly what to say, how to touch, how to make her feel special. But it was all an illusion. Matthias was never a trustworthy man. He was dangerous. Not in the physical sense, but in the psychological sense. He manipulated, played, created dependence and, when she could no longer see anything beyond him, when she was completely surrendered, he simply disappeared. No explanations, no goodbyes, no trace of consideration. She was destroyed. It took years to rebuild herself, to understand that it was never real love, just a web in which she had been trapped. And then she met Daniel. Everything about him was different. He was stable, predictable, safe. A port for your soul that still carried scars from an unhealthy love. She built a new life alongside him, left everything behind, buried any trace of that past. But the dead don't always stay in their graves. Matthias came back. First, just as a shadow. Anonymous messages. Whispers in the street. Strange coincidences. Olivia felt his presence, but tried to ignore it. Until one day, he revealed himself. He appeared in the gallery, as if nothing had happened, with that crooked and cynical smile, as if the years hadn't passed, as if he still had power over her. But now he didn't just want her attention. He wanted more. Daniel listened to each word without blinking, his blood boiling in his veins. He asked what Matthias' real purpose was, why Olivia looked so terrified, why she didn't just push him away. And then, she said. Matthias knew something. Something that, if it came to light, would destroy his reputation, his life, everything he built alongside Daniel. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was something worse. Something that involved a wrong choice, a past mistake that should never be revealed. Daniel felt his frustration growing. He demanded that she be direct. What did he know? Olivia trembled, as if the words were stuck in her throat, as if it were impossible to confess. But then, with a faint voice, he said. She embezzled money. The silence became deafening. Years ago, in a moment of desperation, before her career as an artist took off, Olivia had done the unthinkable. Working as an assistant in a gallery, where she was responsible for financial transactions, she transferred a significant amount to her personal account. It was an impetuous act, a mistake she made under the illusion that she could return it before anyone noticed. But circumstances got out of control. Before he could fix what he did, the gallery owner suddenly passed away, and with the confusion created, the fault was never discovered. The money was used, lost among the needs she had at the time. And the crime remained hidden. Until now. Matthias knew. He had proof. And he used that to trap her in his web once again. Daniel felt the weight of the truth crush him. It wasn't just about a marriage that had been violated. It was about trust, about integrity, about a mistake that could ruin their lives. He rubbed his face, got up from his chair, and started pacing around the office, trying to process. Olivia tried to explain that she never wanted to hide it, that she was afraid, that she thought she would never be discovered. But he could barely hear. Then something inside him broke. He looked at Olivia, and for the first time, he didn't feel love. He felt neither anger nor pity. He felt contempt. He asked how long she had been involved with Matthias. He asked how many nights she lied when she said she loved him while she gave herself to the man who now controlled her. She cried, saying it was never about love, it was about fear, about not knowing how to get out. But for Daniel, nothing made sense anymore. He approached her slowly, leaned forward and whispered that she had made a choice. A choice to keep all of this a secret. A choice to get involved again with someone who already destroyed you once. And now, there was no going back. He took his cell phone from the table, put the photos back on the screen and slid the device towards her. He said that now, everything would be done his way. Because betrayal doesn't just destroy those who are betrayed. She destroys those who betray. And Olivia was about to find out in the worst way possible. The silence between them was dense, filled with everything that hadn't been said. Olivia was still sitting, her eyes were teary, her breathing was shallow, her hands were restless in her lap, but Daniel no longer saw her in the same way. She was no longer the woman he had loved, respected, protected. Now, she was just a stranger sitting in front of him, waiting for him to decide what to do with the truth she had just unleashed on him. Matthias wasn't just a lover, he was a link to a dirty past she kept hidden, a buried mistake that now resurfaced to take its toll. But the debt was not hers alone. It was his too, because even though he had nothing to do with what happened, he was directly in the middle of the storm. And what gnawed at him most was not the embezzlement of money, nor the return of an old love. It was the fact that Olivia had turned him into a naive spectator of his own life, made him believe that everything was fine while she lived by secrets. He got up, walked to the window, watching the darkness outside. The city lights seemed like distant, unreal blurs, as if the world around them had lost meaning. Her voice came hesitantly, almost a whisper, asking what he was going to do. He laughed, but it wasn't a humorous laugh. It was a dry, hollow sound, full of bitter irony. As if the answer were obvious. As if she had any doubt that it was all over. But it wasn't that simple. He knew he couldn't just walk away and pretend none of it existed. There was a game being played and he, whether he liked it or not, was already involved. He turned slowly, eyes meeting hers. She wanted him to help her, wanted him to find a way out of the chaos she created. But how? How to erase what was done? How to disarm a man like Matthias, someone who clearly knew how to manipulate, extort, control? How do you get out of something that was already so deeply rooted? He asked, directly, bluntly, if Olivia really thought Matthias would stop after that. If she truly believed he just wanted to see her submissive and nothing else. Because Daniel didn't believe it. People like that are never satisfied. They always want more. And if she had already given in, if she had already bent the knee to his demands, then what would be the next step? She didn't know how to respond. Tears were streaming down her face, but no excuses were enough now. Daniel took his cell phone out of his pocket, opened the gallery and looked at the photos he had taken that night at the restaurant. It could expose her, it could destroy her reputation the same way she destroyed her trust. I could publish everything, throw her betrayal out into the world, let her bear the weight of the consequences alone. But I knew that Matthias would still be there, a shadow lurking, waiting for the right moment to attack again. An idea began to form, a plan that unfolded before him like an inevitable script. He wouldn't let Matthias win. He wouldn't let Olivia be used as a disposable piece in this dirty game. But I wouldn't forgive her either. Never that. He just needed to act in the right way, at the right time, and make sure that when everything fell apart, it would be Matthias who fell first. Olivia started talking again, asking, begging, saying that it was never about love, that she never wanted to betray him, that Matthias manipulated her, that she was pressured, that she did everything because she saw no other way out. But Daniel didn't want to hear it. She had already lied so much, that now any truth sounded like another piece in her web of deception. The time for believing in her was over. He picked up the jacket that was thrown on the chair and put it on calmly, as if that conversation wasn't the most important of his life. Olivia looked at him as if waiting for an answer, a verdict, a decision that would save her. But he wouldn't give her that. Not yet. He just said that he needed to think, that he wouldn't solve anything right then and there, and that she should go home. When he had decided what to do, she would be the first to know. She hesitated, afraid of what that meant. She tried to argue, tried to get closer, but Daniel backed away, as if her very touch were poison. And then, with nothing else to say, she picked up her things and left. The office fell silent, a heavy, suffocating silence. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. Now, everything was a matter of time. And he knew that, in the end, someone would be destroyed. The only question was who. The night progressed slowly, and Daniel remained in the office, immersed in his own thoughts. The silence around him seemed to amplify the storm within him. Everything he believed to be true was falling apart, and now, caught between betrayal and real danger, he needed to act with precision. There was no room for impulsiveness. Matthias wasn't just any man, he was a strategist, a manipulator, someone who knew exactly how to move his pieces without leaving a trace. If he wanted to win this game, he would have to enter the board without showing his intentions. He took out his cell phone and scrolled through the photo gallery once again. The images of Olivia and Matthias were there, clear, undeniable. The betrayal was exposed before his eyes, but now, it seemed like just a detail within something much bigger. The real problem wasn't that Olivia had given herself to another man. The problem was what Matthias wanted. He wasn't just after her. He wanted control. Power. He knew exactly where to press to bend Olivia, and if he had accomplished it once, he would do it again. The next day, Daniel made a decision he knew he couldn't take back. He needed to face Matthias. Not as a cuckolded husband, but as someone willing to end his game once and for all. I knew where to find him. The man maintained a precise routine, something that Daniel identified over the last few days by observing his movements. And that night, he would be exactly where he needed to be. He arrived at the bar where Matthias used to meet acquaintances and customers. The place wasn't fancy, but it had an air of exclusivity for those who knew how to use it as a safe ground for shady deals. Daniel entered, keeping his gaze cold, as if he were just another man looking for a drink to forget his problems. But her eyes scanned the environment until she found him. Matthias sat in the corner, an unconcerned expression as he stirred the glass in front of him. But Daniel knew that this man was never truly relaxed. His type was someone who was always alert, who always saw the next move before he made it. And at that moment, Daniel was his next move. He approached, pulled out a chair without asking permission and sat down in front of Matthias. The other's eyes shone with a mix of surprise and amusement. He didn't expect Daniel to come straight to him. But he didn't show any nervousness. He just smiled sideways, leaning slightly forward. Matthias broke the silence first, his voice thick with sarcasm. He said he was already expecting that meeting, that it was just a matter of time before Daniel discovered the truth. But what he didn't expect, he continued, was that Daniel would be intelligent enough to act strategically without giving in to the impulse for an emotional confrontation. Daniel kept his gaze fixed, evaluating every word. Matthias spoke with confidence, as if he were always one step ahead. But there was something there, something behind the mask of superiority. Daniel hadn't just come there to talk. I had come to understand. To find out how far Matthias was willing to go. He said, with calculated calm, that he knew everything. I knew about the blackmail. He knew about the embezzled money. He knew the power that Matthias believed he had over Olivia. But what Matthias might not have known, he continued, was that he had no control over it. And if he wanted to turn it into a war, then so be it. Matthias laughed, as if it were a big joke. He asked what Daniel would do. Would you tell the police? Would he expose Olivia and, as a result, ruin his own reputation? He remembered that, in the end, he wasn't the only one with something to lose. If Olivia fell, Daniel would fall with her. But Daniel wasn't there for empty threats. He took his cell phone and placed it on the table, facing Matthias. He said he had enough evidence to expose everything. But not the police. Not through a formal process. He would do worse. He would destroy Matthias from the inside out, where he felt it most. He said he knew who Matthias did business with, he knew the faces of the people who trusted him. And that, if those people discovered that Matthias was untrustworthy, he would no longer have a place in the game. Matthias's expression finally changed. It was subtle, but Daniel noticed. For the first time, he had taken Matthias out of his comfort zone. Matthias tried to hide it, leaning back, crossing his arms as if he still had the advantage. He said Daniel was not the type of man to play dirty. Who always lived within the rules. That I would never be able to do something truly destructive. But Daniel smiled. A cold, humorless smile. He said Matthias didn't know anything about him. That, until that night, he really wasn't the kind of man to play dirty. But Matthias transformed it into something new. And that, when someone is betrayed, when they lose everything they believe to be real, when they have nothing left to lose, then there are no rules. Silence stretched between them. Matthias seemed to evaluate him, measuring the possibilities. And then, Daniel stood up. He took out his cell phone, looked at Matthias once again and said that this was the only chance he would have of getting out of this in one piece. Either it disappeared, or Daniel would have it erased by those he called his allies. Matthias didn't laugh this time. He just stood there, watching Daniel leave. That night, Daniel returned home knowing he had put an end to Matthias's gambling. But he also knew that something inside him had changed forever. He was no longer the same man who walked into that bar. And Olivia? She would still have to deal with the consequences of her choices. But that was something he would decide later. Because, at that moment, he needed only one thing, to start over. And maybe find a reason to believe in love again. Time passed, but the scars remained. Daniel didn't come home that night and, in fact, never came back. He didn't want to hear Olivia again, didn't want to hear pleas, excuses or any attempt from her to rewrite the facts, to lessen the impact of the destruction she caused. The only thing she left was a cold and objective letter informing her that the divorce was on the way and that she would soon receive the documents. Olivia knew there was no going back, that there was no version of history where she could be forgiven. Daniel was gone not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, as if every piece of him that had once belonged to her had been ripped away forever. The next few days were a nightmare for Olivia. The emptiness of the house, the suffocating silence, the look of contempt from the few people who knew about the betrayal. But none of this was as destructive as fear. The fear that had settled in her since the last time she saw Matthias. He disappeared, as Daniel had promised. No message, no call, no trace. But Olivia knew that man. He didn't disappear without a plan. He didn't give up so easily. Then every sound of footsteps on the street made her catch her breath. Every ring on her cell phone made her shudder. There was no peace, just a constant state of alert, waiting for the moment when Matthias's shadow would resurface to exact the ultimate price. But what Olivia didn't expect was that the final blow would come from elsewhere. One morning, as he tried to get on with his life, devastating news arrived. The financial scandal she feared so much came to light. Somehow, documents proving the embezzlement of money were leaked to the media and authorities. His name was splashed across headlines, his credibility annihilated. She was fired from the gallery where she worked, her projects were cancelled, her contacts cut ties. When he tried to understand how that happened, the answer came in a cruel and ironic way. It was Matthias. Somehow he knew that Daniel had won. He knew that Olivia was no longer useful to him, and the moment he realized he could no longer manipulate her, he decided to drag her to his ruin. His silence was never a sign of a truce, but rather a harbinger of his final move. Olivia tried to reverse the situation, looked for lawyers, tried to argue that there was no concrete evidence, but none of that mattered. The stain on his name would never come off. Daniel, on the other hand, rebuilt his life. He left everything behind, moved to a new place, where he didn't need to be reminded daily of the betrayal that destroyed years of his history. It wasn't easy. The lonely nights, the echoes of the past that insisted on haunting him, the anger that burned silently within him. But, little by little, he relearned how to live. He met other people, rebuilt his career, found ways to occupy himself without looking back. And then, when he least expected it, he met someone who brought back something he thought he had lost forever. The love. It wasn't immediate, it wasn't like before, but it was true. And Olivia? Well, she has become exactly what she never wanted to be, irrelevant. Without work, without reputation, without anyone's trust, she lived the following years as just a forgotten name, someone who tried to start over, but never managed to free herself from the weight of her own choices. The world doesn't forgive easily, and she learned that the hard way. And Matthias? No one knew for sure what happened to him. But, in the underworld where he lived, men like him didn't disappear for no reason. The dirty game he loved to play ended up swallowing him, and one day, without fanfare, he simply disappeared. And so, each one followed their destiny. Daniel found his redemption, Olivia found her undoing, and Matthias found the emptiness of his own ambitions. Now, I want to know your opinion. What did you think of this story? Leave your comment and share your reflections. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more impactful stories like this. Remember, betrayal never pays, and every choice has its consequences. Until next time.